Hello everyone and welcome back to the CDL podcast channel. In this one today we are going to be going over the matches from this past weekend from the Los Angeles Guerrillas home series. Please be sure to leave a like, comment, and share the video with someone that loves the CDL and subscribe if you enjoy it. And as a disclaimer for this weekend, I wasn't able to go as in depth with my watching of the matches, like not be super like analyzing and taking as many notes because I celebrate Easter with my family. So I was pretty busy with family and stuff and just like hanging out with them and spending time with them. I went home from college for this weekend and it's probably the last time I will go home for the rest of the semester. So just tried to spend some time with them, caught as many matches and as much analysis as I could. And I tried to watch most of the matches back. So I caught most things, but I may have missed like a few things if it seems like there's something I should definitely hit in one series or something and I might like kind of forget and gloss over it. It's probably because I wasn't able to take as many thorough notes and stuff like during matches as I would normally do. But yeah, without any more delays, I just want to get right into the matches because I want to keep this one a little shorter because we're going to have this. And then we've got to do a prediction video, obviously, because the major is coming even a day earlier this week on Wednesday. So I want to just get into the matches real quick, go over those, go over our power rankings, and then we'll do our hot or not segment again where you guys can comment down below and give your takes on the takes that I offer. But yeah, I think we have nothing else to talk about before we get into our matches. So we'll just start out right away. We're just going to go kind of in order on the Thursday matches. The first match on Thursday was Dallas Empire versus Florida Mutineers. It was a hot 3-0 from the Empire. The first map was a little bit close, a little bit competitive. Skies and Awakening were kind of trying to will their way for Florida to win it, but they ended up losing by about 30. Then the control went 6-4 in favor of Dallas, and a 3-0 checkmate control. That was just kind of a blowout. Overall, I would say, though, this series isn't too shocking. I mean, it's kind of disappointing from Florida, honestly, overall, because I mean, over like last week, we kind of thought that that Florida had a chance to kind of come back and kind of like bounce back, I guess you could say, because they've been on and off. They looked good at first in like the preseason, then looked pretty horrible, then seemed like they were starting to bounce back. And then from there on out, they kind of were on a steady incline, I would say. And then after this week, they're kind of back on the decline with 2 losses. But yeah, they lose to Empire, and overall in the series, honestly, nobody really played all that well on their team. Skies was around a 1, but for your Maniar, having a .97 really isn't all that special, but it's kind of hard for him to do anything when his 2 subs have .8s and Neptune and Slacked. And honestly, that's kind of the theme with Florida, it seems like to me. From the recent play, it seems like that's kind of their theme in Respawn, is they can be a pretty good search team. And they can compete in respawns and maybe win them, but when they play those top teams, it seems like Neptune and Slack just aren't able to keep up. I mean, if you look at huke and illey in this, or not huke and illey, I'm sorry, huke and shottzyy in the series, huke had a 1.2 and shottzyy almost had a 1.4. And then on the side of Florida, Slack and Neptune both had .8s. They're just overall getting dominated by better subs, which is something I didn't think would happen. Slack does seem to, I mean, he's not the most like heavy slaying sub or the best sub, but he seems to, as the year goes on, generally get a lot better. And improve, and he can definitely hold his own. I mean, there's a reason he has so many high placements and multiple tournament wins. I mean, he can hold his own. Neptune, being a young player, comes from Halo. We see a lot of talented players come from Halo, like shottzyy last year. I thought Neptune would be a little better in the slaying category, but he just hasn't been, and I honestly think that's the weakness of Florida right now. And once again, they're trending down. It seems so weird this year because it's like 1 week it seems like somebody's trending like straight up, but like Florida was, it seemed like they were trending up, and it was like I was feeling confident about them, and then all of a sudden they have 2 bad losses this week and they're straight back to trending down. Just a confusing team. After this one, it seemed like Dallas is going to be better, but I mean, clearly we saw later in the week they might not be. And then the second match, moving on from that one, because I don't know, the Florida Dallas one is just kind of weird. I mean, Dallas dominated, obviously. And then the next match in the day was OpTic versus Seattle. And this was a huge match, honestly, for both teams, because Seattle could kind of solidify themselves, and I believe Seattle could have basically locked up a winner's bracket spot with a win in this match, because they would have been, what, they were 2-1 at the time. They would have been, I believe they were 2-1 at the time, or maybe they were, yeah, they should have been 2-1 at the time. So I believe that they would have moved to 3-1, and that would have pretty much locked up a winner's bracket spot for them. And instead, they just kind of got 3-0'd pretty quickly. I mean, the hardpoint was relatively close. And I mean, it was a 250 to 226 on raid. The checkmate search was kind of a blowout, 6-2. Then the control went 3-2. Honestly, I was kind of shocked with this result, I will say, because I mean, based on the previous week, OpTic looked like they were like the worst team in the league. Obviously, we knew they weren't, but they looked pretty horrible in the previous week. They looked like they had like kind of lost their way as a team and just kind of didn't have an identity. And then on the other hand, Seattle looked like the team that really knew their identity almost better than anyone because they knew that they were a slow it down, play methodical, and play smart kind of a team. So, I mean, I thought Seattle had a pretty good chance to win this. I did pick OpTic because I still generally feel like OpTic is the better team and just could have had an off week. And it's pretty rare for like Scump and formal teams and even a team with Dashy and Envoy like that much talent. It would be pretty rare to see a team like that just struggle and lose so many matches in a row. So I expected them to come out and win this. I think it was a really good momentum builder for them to come out and win it 3-0 though, because I feel like if they win this one like 3-2, like a 6-4, 6-5 final search, and like all the maps would be really close, they probably wouldn't have gotten the confidence back that they did. And then I think the one key thing in this series, I mean, overall on the side of Seattle, nobody played like absolutely horrible, but nobody played great. Octane was the only one above a 1 KD. And then on the side of Chicago, Dashy and Formal fried. Dashy at 1.3 and Formal at 1.2. And Envoy was almost around 1.2 as well, but Scump was at a 0.75. And I saw him saying like his confidence was at an all-time low coming into this week. And I'm sure, I mean, when you drop a 0.7, the rest of your teammates are frying. Even when you play at that level, only a 0.7 in a 3-0, obviously you're going to be happy with a 3-0. I mean, KD isn't everything. Scump makes a lot of plays to help the team win. He's kind of been more of a dirty work player over the past few years of his career. But when you have a 0.7 and you're used to being a guy that's a consistent 1.2 for your whole career, it's probably another damper on your confidence, especially when it was a little low. But I think that it was good that this match happened early in the week because obviously we saw it happen later in the week, and it seems like he got his confidence back. But a good series for OpTic, and honestly one not to panic with Surge because they played him close in the hardpoint and played him close in the control. And overall, the Surge, that was kind of the name of the game for the Surge this week, like close but no cigar. Then moving on to Friday, in the first match on Friday, it was Toronto versus London, I believe. Yeah, Toronto versus London. A 3-0 from Toronto. I was kind of surprised at this one because recently Toronto's been kind of shaky. Like, they haven't been bad, but they also haven't been good. They've been kind of like one of those teams that, like, you figure they'll compete in pretty much any series they're going to play in, but you're not really going to necessarily pick them. And London seemed like they were trending up. But it was a rough one from London. I mean, everybody in their team played pretty poorly. Shawnee was the only one even close to a 1. I mean, Paul X had a 0.6, and I mean, Dylan and Zed were around 0.8s. And then on the side of Toronto, Cammy absolutely fried for them. CleanX followed him up. Bance also fried pretty well, and Insight was at a 1. They honestly just didn't have to do much in this series, though, because they fried them so fast. I mean, they beat them by 110 in that checkmate hardpoint. The search went to around 11, and then the control, they just smoked them. 3-1 wasn't much of a contest, but this one was really shocking to me because I figured, if anything, I believe in my pick'ems. See, I know I'm looking at my pick'ems a little bit here in the background. I know you guys can't see it, but I'm looking at them in the background, and I forgot to save them this week, so I can't fully remember what. Or actually, no, am I on the wrong one here? I don't know. But it doesn't seem like they saved, or like the website might have glitched or something, because my picks aren't like saved here as to what I have. But kind of unfortunate, so I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure I picked London in this one. And honestly, it's weird because London, like, the beginning of the year, they were so bad, and you had no confidence in them. And then all of a sudden, Paul X gets picked up. He looks like a superstar. It's like, oh my God, Toronto's kind of on the downfall. London's on the upswing. Let's pick London, and they get 3-0'd. I mean, it's a good sign for Toronto Ultra that they're getting hot going into the major, and it's maybe a sign, I don't know, after watching the match later in the week too, it might be a sign that could be time for a roster change for London, unfortunately. Then moving on to the next match, it was Atlanta Faze versus LAG. This one was kind of weird, and I want to give credit to LAG, obviously, because they hand Faze their first loss, so I mean, that's a huge deal. It seemed like Faze was like playing really weird maps that generally sometimes aren't in their map pool. Maybe that could just be because this match really didn't matter all that much for them. LAG was already in the losers, and Faze had already locked up winners by this point. I don't think they had locked up the first round bye, or like the bye into like winners round 2 or whatever you want to call it. So that would be something to play for. That'd be interesting if they would have just been willing to give that up and like forcing themselves to win their match versus London later in the week. Because even though you'd expect them to beat London, you know, there's always a chance you can lose a match in the CDLs, and there's no really guaranteed free wins. Maybe LA Thieves right now, but LAG is able to take this one. Atlanta kind of beat them pretty easily in that first hardpoint, and then LAG dominated that second Miami search. Faze won a close control, and then I believe it was like 153 to like 90 on that Apocalypse hardpoint, and then they went on like a it was like 160 to 1 run or something like that to close out the Apocalypse hardpoint for LAG, and they beat them by about 100, and they 6-0'd them, dominated them on that express surge. I want to say, like, obviously not time to panic for Atlanta, because then they come back and destroy London later in the week, and they're the best team in the league still. There's no doubt about that. They still should be the favorite to win the major. But it was interesting to see Arcitys struggle so much, dropping a 0.8 in the series. And Abezy even struggled a little bit with the 0.9. Cellium and Simp were even only around 1s, which for their standards, obviously, I mean, a 1.08 from Cellium really isn't bad at all, but for their standards, I mean, they're all expecting to drop 1.2s or higher and stuff. And then on the side of LAG, Silly was kind of the theme for them all weekend. He was very, very good. He had a 1.25 in this series, and this wasn't even his best series in the weekend. He dominated the other series they played against LA Thieves. But overall, it was good to see a sign of life out of LAG. I've been saying the whole year it's very hard for me to pick them because they kind of just are like a team that like has no flashy players, and they're not like a sexy pick ever because they're just kind of like boring in a way. But you know what? You can be as boring as you want if you get wins, and this week they got 2 wins, so I was a little impressed with them. Although I want to take this Faze win with a grain of salt, and if they would have lost their second match, I would have, but they dominated another team, so I'm looking at LAG to possibly have a chance to make some noise in the major this coming week. Then the next match, going on to Saturday, I believe this one should have been on the first match of Saturday. It was Mutineers versus Legion. Another one where, all my picks just seem to be going wrong over the last couple weeks because I know I picked Mutineers for this one, even though I've been picking Paris all year. And then Paris showed me that they were kind of falling off. So I was like, you know what, Mutineers on the OpTic, we'll go with them. And then Paris beats them 3-1. Overall, the map 1 was close, and then Florida won the search, but the control and the second hardpoint were pretty easily handled by Paris. That last hardpoint, Classic absolutely dominated on the map. Aqua also went 26-16, and Fire went 29-20 on the map, but Classic was 36-22, and it seemed like he was just picking up 2-piece after 2-piece in like every crucial situation on that Garrison hardpoint. That's like one of the things that stuck out the most for me this weekend was Classic absolutely frying in that map 4 versus Florida. But on the side of Florida, Skies was around a 1, and Neptune was a little bit over a 1, but Awakening and Slacked both had 0.77s. Another struggling series from Slacked. And Awakening obviously struggled, but I'm not all that worried about that. He'll pick it up. I'm never worried about him to pick things up because, it's Awakening. He's one of the best players in the league. But on the side of Paris, Scraps only had a 0.9, but once again, making like dirty plays. He was back on the sub role. They switched their roles once again. They put Fire back on the flex, even though he was in the sub last week. And he finally had a good series. He had a 1.2 in this series, and Aqua had a 1.2, Classic had a 1.2. And it seemed like the roles make a little more sense for them because, I don't know, I feel like Scraps should be on a flex because I think he's a better flex than Fire. And I think he's a better flex than he is a sub. But Scraps can also be a good sub. Like, I think he can be a superstar on a flex. I don't know necessarily that Scraps can be a superstar on a sub, but I certainly think he can be a very good player on a sub, like an above-average player. And for me, I don't think Fire can be an above-average player on a sub, but I do think he can hit kind of like the average or maybe slightly above average on a flex. So I guess the role switch makes sense because I feel like ceiling-wise, if they all play at their top, I feel like Fire has a better ceiling on the flex than he does a sub, and Scraps has a high ceiling on either. So it makes a little more sense. Then obviously Classic's going to be on a sub, and we know what he brings, and Aqua is on an AR always, and we know what he brings. So I feel like Paris now hit their stride again, and now I'm probably going to pick them to win like 2 matches in the major, and they're going to end up probably losing their first one or something because I have faith in them again. And it seems like every time a team's stock goes up in this game, people kind of jump on them and pick them, and then it goes down. So Florida will probably end up winning a couple matches in the major, and Paris will lose right away because their stock, it seems like you need to pick whatever. If their stock is trending up, you need to pick against them for these middle-of-the-pack teams because this year is the most confusing for all these middle-of-the-pack teams. But this match was really disappointing in general for Florida, and I was really happy to see Paris kind of bounce back after a rough week last week when a team like them where they kind of have everything against them, like all odds against them, that they're like expected to be not a great team coming into the season, and then they start showing that they're very good. Then the second they hit adversity, you see a lot of teams like that just crumble and fold, kind of like Minnesota from last year. They weren't expected to be all that great. They come into the season, they're like maybe a top 4 team. They get hit with a little bit of adversity, and they just fold. And that's kind of what I thought might happen to Paris here, but they bounce back, so maybe that's not the case. Then the next match, Minnesota versus Seattle. This one was kind of one of the most heartbreaking for a team on the weekend. Heartbreaking one for Seattle in that case. They get up in the series 2-0. They win a close raid hardpoint. Then they win a 6-4 search. Minnesota isn't the best hardpoint team, so you were expecting to win that. But when you take the second map search, which is definitely Minnesota's best game mode, Although they are pretty good at control too. But when you take the search and go up 2-0, you're like, oh my god, all we have to do is win one respawn against Minnesota, who's not a great respawn team. Although they are better with Standy, but still, they're a lot better at search than they are respawn. And then the control goes 3-1 in favor of Minnesota. The Garrison hardpoint, they win by about 50, and then they win that last Miami. A lot of questionable plays from Seattle. Obviously, the whole Octane thing has been talked about plenty. And, I mean, he obviously didn't hear accuracy on the slide, or, like, didn't look at his minimap at the right time or something, or, like, didn't understand the call. But something obviously happened there. There's just, like, a miscommunication. I mean, Octane's not a bad player. I mean, he's not clueless on the map, and probably 9 out of 10 situations he probably gets that right. Just probably a perfect storm of timings happened where he just like didn't notice the player was there, and accuracy gets the 1v3. And I mean, if he wins that, there's no guarantee they win the map. I think they still would have been down 4-3 if they won that round or whatever. But just like a series of bad plays from Surge, I'm still not that worried about them. I still have confidence in them. If anything, this series, I mean, it didn't really lower my confidence in Surge. You're going to get reverse swept sometimes. Minnesota's a good team. If anything, it almost lowered my confidence in Minnesota a little bit, because if they're truly supposed to be like a top team, I would almost expect that they should be able, like, Surge is like a good team, but if Minnesota's supposed to be like a top 3 team, I would expect them to be able to take out Seattle like in a 3-1 fashion, or pretty easily, not have to rely on a reverse sweep or something like that, you know. But that's what they had to do, and honestly, they could have and probably should have lost this series. But they don't. They pull off the reverse sweep, so obviously it's good for them. A win is a win. But I'm a little bit questioning them going into the major. I'm like, I was going to put them towards the top of my power rankings, but now I think they're going to fall somewhere around 4. I think it's still too early, and they haven't shown enough consistency to get ahead of those other teams that we believe are the top teams. But I do think that there's a pretty good chance that they end up going far in the major, especially since they have that buy into a winners round 2. Another quick takeaway from this series, I mean, Standy played insanely well again. Priesta looked very good again. Attach looked very good. But on the side of Seattle, Prestinni continued to look really good, which is a good sign for them, because if this team is going to make noise, Prestinni kind of has to step up and be like a big slayer for them. And then the last match of Saturday was NYSL versus Toronto. This was kind of a test match for Toronto, because New York subliners, I think we all view them as I think they're a top 3 team for sure, but I think a lot of people might view them maybe as like a top 4 team at the very least. I mean, if you don't at least view them as a top 5 team, I don't know what you're doing, but they're for sure a top 4 team. And Toronto was kind of towards the bottom, but they get a big 3-0 win versus London, so we're kind of wondering, hey, where do they stand at? Maybe they're kind of gelling now with their new roster. And they didn't play horrible in this series. They kind of got blown out in the first hardpoint. Then the search went 6-4, and they were able to win a raid control versus New York, and New York's been very, very good on raid control. So that was impressive. And then they lost that final hardpoint by 6 points. Like, I mean, the search went to around 10. That's a winnable game for them. And then they win the control, and they lose the last hardpoint by 6. So, like, they were in this series. It was very competitive. It wasn't a 3-1 where they got blown out in the 3 maps they lost. It was a competitive series, so it was a good sign of life for them. And I don't necessarily think that's bad for New York that the series was so close, because New York just tends to play, I swear that New York either reverse sweeps to win a series, or they win every series 3-1 because they just drop like map 2 or 3 or something, because they're not a great search and destroy team. They seem to win map 1, and then they split 2 and 3, and then they win 4, and then they win 3-1 like every series. But ASIM played very, very well in the series. I believe this was New York's only series in the weekend. ASIM, I never know what to say for his name, because people all say it different ways. But I believe he said on Twitter, I believe it was his grandpa and his uncle, both passed away, like, I think pretty shortly before the match, which is obviously heartbreaking stuff. And I believe he said he was like at the funeral, or like spending time with his family, obviously as you would in that situation, like right up until that match. And then they didn't know if he was going to play or not for, obvious reasons. But then he was able to make it for the match, and he played very well. He was probably the best player on their team in that series. So shout out to him. Obviously, thoughts are with him. It's a super difficult thing to go through. It's obviously very difficult to lose a loved one at any time, and especially if you lose 2 at one time, which it sounds like, I don't want to speculate, but it sounds like that's what happened. He lost his grandpa and his uncle, but don't want to speculate on what happened. But obviously, thoughts out to him. And that's absolutely crazy that he was able to play that well under those circumstances, because he probably had a lot weighing on his mind. I know I saw like Clay say he gained a lot of respect for Asim after that series, which I don't know how you couldn't. It's very tough to do anything under the circumstances where your mind's on something else. So shout out to him. Obviously, our thoughts are with him. Hope he gets through this with his family, spend some time with his family in these couple days off. But I'm sure he's preparing for the major, so who knows how much time he has. But shout out to him. Obviously, it's a crazy story, and nobody would have blamed if he didn't play the match. But not only to come out and play the match through that, but to fry like he did was pretty crazy. So shout out to Asim. But in this series overall, it was played very close. I feel like that's not a knock on New York because they play a lot of close series, like I said, and they seem to clutch up and win them. And then Toronto was able to play it close, so that's kind of like a plus for them. But at the same time, Clay had probably one of his worst series of the year. He went 60-82 overall, had a 0.7, and they were still able to win it 3-1. So I feel like that's kind of a plus for New York in a way that Clay played so poorly and they were still able to win in a 3-1 fashion. So kind of just like a general takeaway from this is New York is a top dog and Toronto is going to be able to compete, but I don't think they're going to get over the hump quite yet. And then going into Sunday, our first match was Faze versus London. Faze looked back to their old ways in this one. I mean, they just absolutely dominated London. I mean, this was a pro team playing an AMP team, I'll be honest. Everybody on Faze had a 1.3 or higher, and Arcitys had a 1.5. Shawnee had the best KD on London with a 0.93. I mean, Dylan had a 0.48. He went like 13, like 35 in that map one on Garrison, I believe it was. Yeah. And, I mean, overall in this series, this looked like the Atlanta of the last few weeks. They just absolutely fried. Paulix had his first, or actually, I guess both series he had this week were pretty bad. But he did not play well. I mean, Shawnee even didn't really play all that well for Mr. Consistent that he is. Dylan got absolutely fried. Like I said, this is against Faze, so you got to take it with a grain of salt because you're probably going to get dominated by them. But if you're getting dominated this bad by the number one team, there's almost no chance you ever have to compete for an event. It might be time to look at roster changes. I really thought that the Dylan and Zed combo on the subs had a lot of chemistry and would carry them through matches. But, I mean, in this match, they looked lost. This might be a situation where if Zero can finally get to the U.S., I don't think he's here yet. He might have to get subbed in for Shawnee to be the main or something, or some kind of change has to come through because I can't see them beating any teams besides like the middle of the pack to bottom teams. Like whenever they play a top team, I just don't think they're going to be able to find a win. So I think it might be roster change time for them. And the next match was the Battle of LA, Thieves versus Gorillas. Another situation where thoughts with another player. Kenny wasn't able to play this match. I believe they said it was like an emergency health situation that wasn't related to COVID. So obviously hoping that he gets better at any time soon here, whenever he can get back. Obviously health comes first. But Temp had a sub in for the series. Obviously Temp didn't play well at all. He went 44 and 64 on the series, 0.69. But it's kind of tough to get thrown into that situation. He's probably never played a game with Venom in his life. And he just got thrown into the gauntlet and tried to play kind of like a series for LA Thieves that's kind of like, well, that's tough because you're playing with a relatively new player in your team in Venom, and then you had to throw Temp. The chemistry's probably not there since he was just dropped by you, and he just kind of got thrown in with a bunch of new players like Venom that he's never played with. And then they get dominated by LAG. A really good series from Assault and Vivid. Even Apathy played all right, but Silly absolutely fried. He went 72 and 42, had a 1.7 on the series. Right now, coming into this year, I figured if they were going to be competitive, it would have to be Apathy and Vivid picking up the Slain slack. I mean, because obviously Assault's always going to be around a 1 or something because he's the AR. But I thought it was going to have to be Vivid and Apathy picking up the Slain slack, but it looks like it's Silly that's going to pick it up for now. And once again, it's hard to judge LAG from this because I want to say they're a better team now that they won 2 series this week and beat Faze. And obviously a LA Thieves team, but Faze seemed like they were playing a different map pool, and LA Thieves had a Temp in who's been a substitute now and hasn't played in a couple weeks, so it's like you want to say that LAG is good, but I mean it's a little bit questionable with the teams they beat. But I mean 2-0 is 2-0, so you got to give them some credit. And the final match of the week was probably our best match on the weekend. It was OpTic versus Dallas, and this is a weird series because it was 3-2 OpTic. They lost the hard point in map 1 that they probably should have won. Dallas just gets a 4-wipe right at the end on that P4 by the bus, and then they win it by 6. And then OpTic dominated that raid search, just a clinic 6-2. And then the checkmate control went 3-2. It came down to like a 4v4 in lives. And it went down to that illey versus Scump 1v1. And I feel like if that was on land, Scump probably wins that because it literally was just he hit like the first 4 bullets and then illey just like triple headshot him or something and killed him. And then the checkmate hardpoint map 4, OpTic almost 100-point clubbed him. And then in the checkmate search, in map 5, OpTic won 6-1 and absolutely dominated them. Scump kind of went off in that map 5. Looked like a little bit of vintage Scump. He went 9-4 on the map. But this series, the reason I say it was interesting is because like the map 1 was close and the map 3 was close, but OpTic absolutely blew them out in all 3 maps they won in map 2, 4, and 5. And like if you look at the KDs in the series, Crimsix at a 0.7, Huke at a 0.8, illey 0.7, shottzyy was around a 1. On the side of Chicago, they had a 1.2 for every player, except dashyy at a 1.3. Like, that's like one of my takeaways. We'll talk about this later, but this was a scary series if you're Empire because it seems like you probably should have got beaten 5-0, to be honest with you. I mean, OpTic probably could have won every map, and it seemed like OpTic talent-wise was just head and shoulders above Empire. Like, it would have to be a situation like Champs last year where Faze was probably more talented than Empire, but Empire was completely more prepared, so they won it. But right now it seems like OpTic is completely outclassing Empire in talent, but I don't want to get too much into this match because one of our hot or not takes later in the pod involves that. So that's pretty much going to do it for the matches for this weekend. It was a crazy set of matches, obviously. A pretty good amount of blowouts, but I feel like we got a little bit better of a grasp on some teams. With that being said, though, I want to get into the power rankings. Once again, it seems like I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on who the top 6 is and who I want to put in the top 6, but then 7 through 11, basically you can throw in any order you choose. So I kind of threw it in order based on kind of who I'm most optimistic about in a way, except for I had LAG above a couple teams that I probably wouldn't normally because you have to put them with their 2-0 performance in beating Faze. But 7 through 11 is just kind of a crapshoot of teams. I mean, I have no problem if you think that my number 11 team should be 7. I honestly have no problem with it because I think they're all just basically even. For those 7 through 11 teams, I think it's just like any given weekend, who's ever hot is probably the top of that pack. But we'll start at the bottom like we normally do. At number 12, I have LA Thieves. I feel like you have to have them there. We don't know if Kenny's going to be able to play this weekend because of the health issues that he has. And if he doesn't play, it's almost a guaranteed loss for them because he's arguably the best player. And overall, they just kind of look like they're in shambles ever since the roster change. With Temp, they seemed like their ceiling was a little lower, like they were going to be able to win some matches. But now without Temp and the Venom switch doesn't seem like it's worked. It seems like their ceilings are very, very low. I could see them easily bouncing back and getting towards the middle of the pack again. But as of right now, they're towards the bottom. One good thing for them is because the fact that they started out the year not so bad with Temp and were able to win some matches. They have like 60 CDL points and they're in 6th. So it's not like last year where they started so low and then finally bounced back a little bit towards the end of the year. This year they started a little quicker and actually got points. So right now they're in the winners bracket or in the playoffs, I guess, for champs. Because I believe only top 8 make it this year. So for them, the nice thing is they do have a little bit of wiggle room to finally figure it out. And maybe if they can win 2 matches at this major or something, they can kind of keep themselves in the top 8. But they're definitely number 12 right now. And then, like I said, this 11 through 7 section, I'm just going to fly through it a little bit because I believe they're all pretty even. I just kind of threw them in a random order in a way where I kind of think where their upside is. At 11, I have London. Dylan looks so horrible this weekend. Paul finally showed that he was human, and the takeaway I had from it is if Paul isn't absolutely frying, London stands no chance, and we saw it this weekend. He didn't fry, and they stood no chance. When you're so reliant on one player to absolutely carry you, I believe you got to be more towards the bottom because, once again, you're relying on him to basically get you the win. So they're at number 11. Then 10 is Florida. Florida is another team that I feel like should be a top 6 team with their talent, but for some reason, Neptune and Slack can't put together in respawns. And for that reason, they're at 10. Then at 9, I have Paris. I would love to put Paris at 8 because I have more faith in them than LAG to make it far in like the major. But this is more also looking into stage 3. I believe LAG has a chance to win their first match since they play Florida. But at the same time, I put Paris at 9 because I do think their upside's high, but LAG had a 2-0 week, and they beat Faze, so I have to give them a little bit of a nod and put them at 8. Then at 7, we have Toronto. Toronto has looked a little better recently. They've kind of been beating up on bad teams. They played New York tight, and they start in the winners bracket, so I feel like they have a little bit more of a chance to make noise. And overall, I just feel like among these teams, like LAG can lay an absolute dud of a series and get blown out. I believe Paris can too. I also believe Mutineers can, and I believe London can. I don't think Toronto, after now that they're a little more gelled, I don't think they have as much chance to lay a dud of a series. I think they're going to make most series competitive, so I decided to go with them at 7. Now we're cracking into the top 6. I feel like the order here, I feel like my 1, 2, 3, I feel very confident in. And then I could see switching around 4 and 5, and I also feel very confident with my 6. I think you know who 6 is going to be at Seattle Surge. I have them here because I feel like their talent and their gun skill, especially like Looney and Prestinni and Gunless, are finally coming around to where I believe they could be. And they're playing so smart. Obviously, they lose both matches this week. They get 3-0 by OpTic, but OpTic is a better team than them, so that's not as much of a shocker. And they do get reverse swept by Minnesota, but I believe that series could have easily gone their way. Just a couple bad things go their way. And if Minnesota is supposed to be this great team that everybody thinks could be a top 2 team, and Surge's up 2-0 on them, that obviously shows that Seattle has some talent on them. So I have them at 6. Then at 5, probably the lowest they've ever been on a power rankings, Dallas Empire. This is the one I said I could see switching between 4 and 5, because at 4 I have Minnesota. But 5 I have Dallas Empire right now because, I mean, they beat Florida, but we saw Florida get dominated by Paris, so you honestly don't really know. I feel like Florida's kind of in shambles right now, so I don't really know how good that 3-0 win was. And then they were just completely outclassed gun skill and mechanically by OpTic. So Dallas is kind of on the downfall, and that's why we have Minnesota at 4, because, I mean, they were another team who was in shambles. They were 0-2. It looked like they had nothing going for them. They were probably going to finish in the bottom of their group. All of a sudden, they pick up Standy. They run 3 straight matches off, and then 3-2 was enough. With the gauntlet that was Group B, 3-2 was enough to get them the first seed, and they have a bye into winners round 2. They look very good recently. Honestly, if they can clean up their hardpoint and make it better, they have a good chance to win the next event, because they're arguably the best search team in the game, and they're 3-0 in control with Standy. So, I mean, if they can just clean up that hardpoint and make it just average or a little bit above average, they have a pretty good chance to win the major. And that's why I have them at 4, because I feel like they're so good in 2 game modes. When you're so good in 2 game modes, and they're not absolutely horrible at hardpoint anymore, so when you're so good in 2 game modes and just have that chance to steal that 1 game mode, I feel like they have a pretty good chance to win the event. Then at 3, I feel like this should be obvious. I've got New York. Once again, the reason I move OpTic ahead of them is because I believe OpTic is the more talented team. New York's a little bit more consistent, though, which is why I could see you putting New York at 2 above OpTic if you wanted to, but I just feel like the talent in OpTic is going to outweigh the consistency of New York in most series, unless it happens like in the first major where OpTic lays a dud in their second match against New York or something. But I do believe OpTic is the better team than New York right now, just talent-wise. Although I wouldn't be shocked if you put New York at 2, I have no problem with it. And then Faze is obviously that one loss to LAG isn't going to change the fact that they have been and are the best team in the game right now. You can't put them below 1 unless like OpTic or New York win this next major, or Minnesota. Nobody can take over Faze at number 1 unless they're unable to win this next event. But that's it for the power rankings. They became an absolute mess once you leave the top 6, like I said, in my opinion. I pretty much think you can throw 7 through 11 after Faze, Chicago, Subliners, Minnesota, Dallas, Seattle. After those 6, I think you can pretty much throw 7 through 11 in any order, but LA Thieves kind of have to be 12 right now, just with the way their team's going. Doesn't even seem like they have a roster, really, that they want to go with. And they're the only team in the league that's like that, so they got to be at 12. Then finally, the last little segment I want to do, following the power rankings, is the hot or not. So like I said, once again, I'm going to give a controversial take, kind of like a hot take, that has to do with this weekend. And if you agree with it, comment down below that it was a hot take and why you agree with it, or like what points of it you agree with it. And if you don't agree with it, say that take's not it, and why you disagree with it. We can get the discussion going again. The discussion in the comments last week was really good. So let's get that discussion going again and talk about that. And tell me why you disagree with it overall. The first take is OpTic Chicago has the best chance to compete with Faze as the top dog because they have the most talent and like mechanical skill of the other teams. I truly believe that apart from Faze, OpTic is probably the most talented team mechanically because this weekend they just flat out outclassed Empire in talent and gun skill, and probably should have won every single map that they played. It was just a slaughter in terms of gun skill, like I said. I think the only argument you could maybe have in terms of talent is Rocker, because Attach, Standy, and Priest are very talented, but I think the formal difference over accuracy and talent is pretty big. And when Dashy and Formal are also clicking on the AR like they were, I think they have the ability to outplay Arcitys and Cellium with the 2 ARs, and I don't know that there's another AR duo in the league that I can think of off the top of my head that can compete and possibly even outplay Arcitys and Cellium because they're so nasty. And then with Scump and Envoy, I don't necessarily think that they can outplay Abezy and Simp, but I think they have just as good of a chance to match them as any other sub duo in the league. And with Scump playing how he did at the end there, I feel like that gives their subs like just as good of a chance to keep up, like I said, because Scump started to fry. It seems like he got his confidence back with the way he was talking. So basically the take is OpTic is the team that is most equipped talent-wise to take out a Faze, and they have the best chance to compete with them and take over as the top dog. And the reason I say that this is a hot take and I want to hear your thoughts is because obviously you could say a team like New York, Minnesota, or Dallas is the other team, so I kind of want to hear your thoughts on that one. Then the next one is, this is another one that I'm not really sure how I feel, but I want to hear what you guys think. I'm going to say that the Seattle Surge will make the top 2 in their group in Stage 3. So this doesn't have to do with the next major coming up. It has to do with the stage after this. I believe Surge will finish top 2 in their group. Obviously, that's kind of like a hot take and controversial, and I don't know how much I truly believe it, but I kind of want to hear your thoughts on it. I just feel like we saw constant improvement out of them in this stage, and they honestly probably should have been 4-1. They lost that Game 5 round 11 to Dallas that they could have very easily won. That would have made them 3-1, and then they lost that that reverse sweep to Minnesota this week in a series they could have won. They win both of those. They'd have been 4-1, and they'd have been first in their group instead of Minnesota. And we'd be thinking completely different about the Surge. They'd have a bye into winners round 2 out of nowhere. And obviously there's no guarantee that they're going to get top 2 in Stage 3. But I want to hear your thoughts on if you think Seattle gets a top 2 in Stage 3, or if they're going to finish 3rd, or if you think they're going to fall off and finish towards the bottom. I just want to hear if you think it's realistic that Surge could get top 2 in their group in Stage 3. And the last take I want to go with is kind of one not as much with an individual team or anything, but more on the meta and Black Ops Cold War as a whole. I think that this new meta with like mostly 2 Krigs on every map and then 2 74Us is the best meta we've had all year long. I don't know what it is, but I just like enjoy watching the whole like 2 established ARs and 2 established subs. And I feel like there's still maps like Raid, Hardpoint, or like Control, or like maybe even like a Garrison respawn, because like you can pull out a 3rd sub on those maps sometimes. And Garrison, I know a lot of the pro teams don't do, but like we do it a lot in league play, and I feel like the 3 subs in that map just constantly pushing up mid and like taking control of like the small rooms, like in lights and like in top green and just like bricks, like that whole small areas in the map. I feel like subs taking over, you can run 3 subs, but like there are a lot of maps where it's 2 Krig, 2 74U, and then even some maps where it can be like a QBZ, a Krig, and then 2 74Us, and even some maps can be 3 74Us. So I feel like this meta just starts to bring us closer to that time where we always had true flexes, where they actually have to switch between weapons, and like in World War II where you had to switch between the PPSH and the STG or bar, and the flexes actually had to run both ARs and subs, and I absolutely love that because it adds a skill gap and it actually is a true flex. Like in Black Ops 4, we technically had flexes that use the Maddox, but that's not really a flex. They just use the in-between gun. Like, a flex is actually supposed to switch between a sub and an AR, and it's the spot in the league that takes the most skill. Guys like Karma ran it, and even Krim ran it at times. Gunless is always known to me as, like, the best flex, because, like, World War II and IW Gunless was just different on the flex. And I just love this meta because it seems like the flex isn't fully back like it used to be, but it seems like it's closer to being back, and it just adds a skill gap that I just love to see. But comment down below on each of those. Do you think it's a hot take, meaning you agree with it and why you agree with it? Or is it not a take? Do you not like the current meta as much? Or do you not think that Seattle Surge is going to finish top 2 in their group in Stage 3? And do you not think that OpTic is the team that can take over for Faze as top dog, or has the best chance to? But that's going to do it for this one, I believe, this reaction episode. Be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed as well. Share the video with somebody else who loves the CDL. I expect to be back tomorrow probably with my predictions for the second major coming up here, because it's happening on Wednesday. This video will probably go up Monday night before the major, reacting to the matches from the weekend. But we got a lot to get over because instead of having till Thursday, the major starts on Wednesday, so we've got to get that prediction video out hopefully by Tuesday. But that's going to do it for this episode reaction for the LAG home series in Stage 2. This has been Ryan with the CDL Podcast. Thank you all for watching. I look forward to making the prediction video, and I hope you guys look forward to watching it. That'll be out soon, so I'll see you in that one. And thanks for watching. Have a great day, everyone.